So in addition to DaVinci Resolve tutorials, I also do Blender tutorials. And today I'm going to teach you how to make money with Blender as a beginner. Money just like this. Yeah, it's kind of clickbaity, but hey, I got you here, didn't I? For this tutorial, I'm going to assume that you at least have a basic understanding of how to use Blender, and if you don't, then what are you doing? Go make the f***ing donut. So the only thing you'll need for this tutorial is a front and back image of a currency note of your choice, and in this case we went with a big boy Benny C note. I found an image online with a watermark, but you can just take your own pictures with your phone if you want. However, I am legally obligated to inform you that printing counterfeit currency is against the law and punishable by up to 20 years in federal prison. Unless you're the US government. Let's get started before the feds show up. Open a new project file and send the default cube to the Shadow Realm along with its camera and sun lamp followers. Spawn a new plane and resize it into the rough shape of a dollar bill. Press Ctrl R to create a loop cut and scroll wheel up to increase the amount of loop cuts. Do this along both X and Y axes. We do this to create a little bit of extra geometry. It helps the mesh play a little bit nicer when we get to texturing. I rotated the plane along the X axis 90 degrees so I could easily view it from the front by pressing 1 on the numpad. It's a good idea to press Ctrl A in object mode to apply all these transformations. It's a good habit to get into, so go ahead and just do that, trust me. Now we're going to head into the shading tab. Go ahead and adjust the workspace to your liking. Create a new material and change the name to something slick. Press Shift A and drop in an image texture node. Make sure you have the Node Wrangler add-on enabled so you can spawn this mapping node and texture coordinate node by pressing Ctrl T. Delete the texture coordinate node and replace it with a UV map node. We'll get into why later, but for now, just do it because I told you to. Click the folder icon and find your currency image where you saved it and select it. Connect it to the base color input of the principal BSDF. And whoa, that looks like shit. Don't worry, we're gonna fix it though. Also, I forgot to do this initially, but if you don't want your dollar bill to be shiny, increase the roughness value on the principal BSDF node all the way up to 1. Open up a sub window to the UV editing page. Remember when I rotated that plane 90 degrees on the X-axis? That was so I could view it from the front in an orthographic view by pressing 1 on the numpad. Press 1 on the numpad to view the plane from the front. Enter edit mode, press A to select all points, then press U and select project from view. Back in the UV editor, you'll see that the layout of the points now matches the shape of the dollar bill. Scale the points up to fit the size of the dollar image by scaling along the X and Y axes. However, since the plane is technically infinitely thin, the reverse side is just showing a reverse of the image that we're projecting on the front. So how do we go about putting the back image of the dollar onto the back of the plane? Well, you're probably thinking we're just going to make another plane and we're going to stick them really close together and just kind of like stick them together so that it's actually two planes stuck together. Well, what are you, stupid? No, of course you're not. You're smart. What we're going to do is we're going to make another UV map and we're going to reproject. So follow along. In the UV map node that we put at the beginning of the tree, click the box and select UV map. That's the one that's covering the bend side. Head over to the object data panel and click the UV maps dropdown. Click the plus sign to add another UV map. Be sure to rename it for organizational purposes. Call it back like I did. Or call it something else like Reginald. With the back map selected, head into edit mode. Make sure all of your points are selected by pushing A and, in the UV editor, drag the UVs down so that the back side of the dollar image is covered. By changing the UV map in the UV map node to back, you'll see that it'll switch to the back projection image. So how do we combine both UV maps into the same plane? Well, we're going to use something called backfacing. That's right, backfacing. So how do we do that? Well, I'm about to tell you, relax, jeez. Make some extra space in your node tree and duplicate your principal BSDF node by pushing Shift D. Actually, just go ahead and duplicate everything. Connect up the image texture to the base color input. I pressed H to collapse the principal node just for space reasons. Add in a mix shader node and drop it on the pipe here. Go ahead and run the output pipe from the other principled node into the bottom shader input on the mix node. Here's where the magic happens. Search and drop in a geometry node. Connect the back-facing output to the factor input of the mix shader. This will project the texture of the dollar's back onto the back side of the plane. If your image is flipped, it's okay, it's an easy fix. All you need to do is go back into the UV editor and select all the points, push S to scale, push X to lock it on the X axis, and then type in the value -1. And that should flip the UVs so the image is projected correctly. We're done with shading, so head back into the layout tab, rotate the dollar along the X axis 90 degrees to lay it flat. Press O to turn on proportional editing, scroll wheel up and down to adjust the area of effect. I simply made some small adjustments so the dollar didn't look perfectly flat, using G to grab and move and R to rotate, so on and so forth. I also added a subsurface modifier to remove any potential blockiness of the plane. If you do this and you get rounded corners, that's okay. Just press Ctrl R to add a loop cut along the edges and just drag them out until it flattens out. Your dollar is beautifully crafted and perfectly imperfect. And here's how to do the animation. Adjust the positioning and rotation of the dollar to taste. Press I to add a keyframe, in this case to the rotation. Move forward in the timeline to the frame you want, in this case frame 90. Then press R, then Z to constrain it to the Z axis, and type 360 to rotate it for a full turn, that's 360 degrees. Then press I again to add another rotation keyframe. If you want this animation to be loopable, box select all the keyframes in the timeline, right click, and set the interpolation mode to linear. In your render settings tab, make sure your preferred render engine is selected. I went with Cycles in this case. Make sure your GPU compute is selected and add some motion blur. You can set up some lighting if you want, but I went the easy route and used an HDRI. So go to the World tab and click on the color, then select Environment Texture. Navigate to where your HDRI is downloaded and select the one you want. Back in the render settings, scroll down and expand the film section. Then check the transparent box. This eliminates the background image, but it retains the lighting data. Drop your render max samples to something like 500 and drop your tile size to about 512 since you're using your GPU. Finally, drop in a camera and adjust it to the view you like. You can immediately bring the camera to your current view by pressing Ctrl Alt and 0 on the numpad. In your scene settings, set your frame rate, I went with 30 frames per second, and set your save location. Make sure you choose a file format that supports transparency. Blender chooses PNG by default. And make sure to change the end value of the frame range to the same frame of your last keyframe, in this case frame 90. Before you render your frames, be sure to save your project file that you hadn't saved the entire time because you're an idiot, then press Ctrl F12 to begin rendering. Once you have your frames rendered, go to Adobe Premiere Pro. What you want to do is drag that piece of shit to the trash bin and open up DaVinci Resolve like the absolute Chad that you are. Import the frames as an image sequence in the media page. Make sure the frame mode is set to sequence so you don't fill your screen with files. Then render it out as a video file with transparency. So there you have it. That's how you make money with Blender as a beginner. So I never really know how to end these things, so I guess I'm just gonna finish by